Hello, I'm going to try to make this video no longer than 10 minutes, so I'm going to pause intermittently. Yes. So this is for anybody who may have been the target of an alienation campaign from the other parent or their ex or whatever. And it's also for anyone who's just curious about how a child might actually become alienated when all signs, according to the allied favored parent, all signs point to the fact that the other parent is just bad or dangerous for the child or children, and they must be avoided, and they are just doing their job as a parent to protect the kids from their ex or the other parent. So actually I can see that this is going to take probably 2 videos, but if you can stick with me, I will make this abundantly clear how this kind of a dynamic plays out. Now, this is based on actual studies into the subject. So yeah, like clinical psychological testings and studies and surveys, and by actually, clinical psychologists who research this topic, because it is quite insidious and very difficult to actually prove in a family court situation unless you do have, some proof. But, especially where there have been lies about the targeted parent, accusations of abuse and so on, it can be very difficult, and it makes it look like the targeted parent is simply, just trying to blame the other parent, which is actually not the case. They're trying to actually clear up the situation in most cases. I would say in most cases. Now, this does not mean that abuse does not exist, or that, if a parent is actually, abusive or neglectful, that there should be steps to correct the situation, right? Definitely. Correct or improve the situation, right? Yes, I'm all for that. Okay, so the research that... just one more comment on that, actually, and this is not from anything anyone else has said, but, well, actually, I have read into the other side, and there are a lot of statistically, it's usually men who are alienated, like the women alienate, or paint a picture of the fact that the father is, has been violent, or instances of SA, or stuff like that. And that is normally in courts very often just kind of taken at face value, and it's very often men who are trying to, put in a position of having to prove that, either these incidents are false, or they're twisted, or whatever it is. So there have been instances that I've seen where, claims of alienation it's made up just to say that, like it can be used just like accusations of abuse can be falsely used. So claims of alienation can be falsely used, but where there are actual cases of alienation, it is really important to understand, the backstory and look at all the evidence, because the actual effects long-term on a child, and this has also been studied and reviewed, and there is a lot of evidence that points to the fact that children who have been alienated to reject a loving parent, there is overall abundant evidence that shows they are much more likely to commit acts of self-harm, as well as substance abuse later on, as well as having great difficulty in their own relationships as they grow into adults. And, obviously there are no absolutes, so it's not like every single situation. However, there is a lot of evidence that points to that fact, and that their concept of attachment and their concept of relationships in general become very manipulated and damaged. It actually, because they are still developing, it's very damaging, especially, okay, so moving on. So Dr. Amy J.L. Baker, PhD in developmental psychology from Columbia University, identified these 17 points of, basically 17 observations of behaviors that indicate there has been alienation. Through studies with adults who were alienated as children with targeted parents. They've been validated in multiple subsequent peer-reviewed studies. And this is all, anybody can find out this information. Her work, I'm going to try to skip through this a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of this, and then there's also some work from, he's a psychiatrist. His name is Richard A. Gardner. But his research into this topic is very illuminating, and anyway, we'll get into that. I know I'm going to have to make a couple videos on this. Sorry. Okay. But, if you're interested, stick with me, and I will fill in all the pieces of the puzzle. Okay, sorry. All right, ready? Okay. So here we go. I'm actually going to start this, and it's in part 2. So the 17 primary parental alienation strategies, and then the other guy, Richard Gardner, he's got a lot of videos on YouTube about this, but he basically goes over the 8 behavioral manifestations in the child. These were originally described by blah, 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 this guy, and subsequently validated by Baker and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they used his studies in their stuff. The more of these present and the more severe the alienation. But not all 8 need to be present for alienation to exist. So stay tuned for part 2.